Well, what is the business that you're in? What is your basic business?
Well, it's just making films, really. I mean, it's. I wish I was a better businessman and knew more about how to raise money. It's not a field I'm good at.
But as a director, you're selling your services.
Yes, that's right. I'm just selling me. I mean, people come along and say, well, we think Bruce might be a good director for this film. Or more often, we think he might not.
So what were the early experiences of you making money in this business?
When I started doing the Barry Mackenzie films, I was still earning very modest money, but that was the first time I ever had to pay tax in my life. Of course, once I started working for American studios, then there was more income and more tax.
And did that make you a small business because of that?
What do you mean, small business?
Did you need advisors to help you as a mini business?
I never really had an advisor, just an accountant. Because the contracts were always fairly simple. And, you know, they offered a fee and you'd say, well, yes or no. I always said yes. And then the accountant would try and, you know, would work out the deal so that you got certain amounts at certain times and all that kind of thing.
What were some of the less pleasant experiences from which you learnt?
Well, the worst thing that happened to me was that I had an agent initially, a very nice man in Los Angeles, who had always worked with the old system of the director getting paid part of his fee on the first day of principal photography. And I was never very happy about this because it often meant that you might have worked for 6 months or even more before that first day of principal photography. And if something went wrong in that period, say 5.5 months, and you're a couple of weeks from shooting and they decide not to do the film for some reason, you don't get any money at all. So I said to the agent, what I really want to do is start getting paid when I start working, proportionately to the fee. Because I said otherwise, you know, 2 or 3, I think 3 times I ended up with nothing after many, many months of work. And he said, well, we've always done it this way. And I said, yes, but you always did it that way in the old Hollywood days when they were all gentlemen and they would have paid. I said, nobody's like that anymore. They're all sharks. I said, if they can get out of paying, they will. And I said, unless I start getting the money from the moment the flag falls, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to go to another agent. And he wouldn't agree, and I did go to another agent who did agree. And I started getting the money from the minute I started working.
But it is, even though you say, you know, you're a director and they want you, because of these experiences, you've had to acquire some business skills.
Some, but not many. I now do something I never used to do, which is I read the contracts very carefully. I mean, it sounds ridiculous that I actually made a number of films and never read the contracts, but that is in fact the case. I now read them. I read every little clause, and then I often call up my lawyer and say, look, I don't think that bit's right, or I don't think that bit's right, or query this or query that. And I have, on occasion, picked up points, and he said, oh, you're right, we should do that.
And when you're making a film and you're on set, it's like a factory, and you're in charge. How do you deal with the human resources element when sometimes some people can be very difficult and they could be damaging your process?
Well, I must say that generally speaking I found that people haven't been very difficult because you're working with a lot of professional technicians who are always, well, wonderful. Actors tend to be extremely professional as well. I mean, they're very much on the ball. I mean, most actors who are working because they do turn up on time, they do know the lines and all that kind of thing. I think in all the films I've done, which is 25 or more, I think the worst thing that ever happened to me was Ashley Judd came half an hour late. So I haven't had any huge problems with those things. The problems, not with making the films, problems have tended to come around with studio executives, who, many of whom are frustrated directors themselves. And then when the film is done, they often step in and say, we can improve this. We can cut it this way, we can remove this scene, we can take that one out. We can put the end on the beginning and we'll put a voice-over and a new music score. And before you know it, the film's a shambles. That can happen quite easily.
But what do you do to safeguard against that? Have you learned to safeguard against that?
To some extent. You can try and safeguard against it in the contracts, but it's difficult. And you usually, you can find yourself fighting like a tiger to keep certain scenes in and to stop them doing things. I mean, even in films like Driving Miss Daisy, which would have appeared to have been very straightforward, there were suggestions made that a couple of sequences were dropped, which were, in fact, among the most popular scenes in the film. And, I did kick up a huge fuss and said, you cannot drop those scenes. And luckily I won. I've nearly always won, but not absolutely every time. I mean, I've had scenes removed that I thought were very damaging to the movie, damaged the film's chances of working.
Ultimately, you are a brand. You are the Bruce Beresford brand. So whatever you do affects that brand in a business sense. Are you conscious of that? Do you think about that when you select projects?
Oh, well, I mean, I haven't ever select projects that appeal to me emotionally. I'll read a script or perhaps write a script that has some, where the story has a resonance to me, or the characters do. I've taken a few things on, really, because I was desperate for money, but I've actually, generally speaking, managed to keep working on projects that really did interest me, where the stories move me in some way. And that's really all I think about. I don't really sit down and try to analyse, will they all like this, will they all like that? I mean, who knows? I mean, you're wrong half the time anyway. Everybody said Driving Miss Daisy would be a fiasco. It wasn't.
How do you then build a sustainable business like that as a director?
Just keep going. You just have to sort of keep going and let everybody know you're there. I mean, luckily, most of the people who are in the film business, say in Europe or in America, most of them are film fanatics. They know films. And I'm often amazed, when I'll get calls from people from, say, Hollywood, and they've seen my films. They say, oh, I saw this one, I saw that one, and I like that Bruce, and, we want you to do a film for us. And I think they've often seen films that I thought were really quite obscure and didn't even get shown that much. But they're like you see, they love films. They're in the business of producing them, but they're well informed. And so they do tend to know all the directors and their work.
Who are some of the people who've had the biggest impact on you?
You mean producers or...
Anyone.
Oh, yes, there have been a number of people. I mean, working with Richard Zanuck in Los Angeles, with Sue Millican in Australia, with people like Alan Ladd. There's a lot of very, very good people around. In fact, it's crucial when you are directing a film to get into bed, figuratively speaking, with the right people, because then you'll find the film will go ahead fairly smoothly. You've got to be in there with a lot of like minds. So when you're discussing the script, or when you're talking about casting, talking about locations, design, you're dealing with people who are on the same wavelength. Because if you get tied up with a lot of the wrong people at the beginning, people who really don't think the same way, you're going to have a really rough time. They're going to try and change everything.
What about luck? Does luck play an important part?
Enormously. I mean, I think in a way I've been very lucky. I mean, a few things, a few films have clicked and a few films have come my way just almost by chance. Of course, luck's always a matter too of seizing it. In a way you kind of make the luck. You sort of think, wait a minute, there's an opportunity there, bang, you dive in. So the luck could be there for 50 people and only 2 or 3 might see it.
Would you ever invest in a film that you were going to direct?
Yes, I probably would. I think I have. Yes, I've directed a couple of films for nothing that I believed in.
Were they good business decisions?
Well, in the case of Driving Miss Daisy, it was, because it went into profit and they paid me. But there were a couple of others that I did for, really absurdly low fees, because I did passionately believe in the stories. And I never really did make much money out of them, but I made enough to keep the wolf from the door.